I know more about poltergeists than most humans on Earth. This isn't a boast. I wish I didn't know anything about the subject. I wasn't interested in the subject, nor did I study the subject when I found myself being harassed on a daily basis by a poltergeist demon. As I studied the poltergeist spirit studied me for 5.5 months. Every single day for 5.5 months in a row, the demon spirit moved 10 to 20 objects a day, from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. Not including knocks, bangs, creaks, dings, and sitting sounds, the demon poltergeist moved an average of 15 items a day as I watched or listened. This adds up to 2,475 objects moved by the poltergeist in the space of 5.5 months. I witnessed this. This is a fact to me. I understand if it's only an anecdote or a story to someone else. For the past 4 years, I've made numerous videos detailing my encounters with the entity, many hours worth. In this video, you will see a quick compilation I edited in the space of a few hours, showing a few videos where I talk about my history with the poltergeist. 2 of the videos I've never shown until now. I'm writing a book on my history with the spirit for the singular purpose of leaving a true account of what happened in my life before I die. I consider these videos the same, to be left for posterity. Perhaps only a few will benefit from this information. Poltergeists are intelligent conscious beings, independent from mankind. Why they choose to reveal themselves to the few instead of the many is unknown. Why they chose to bother me, I have some clues I will share in the future, but the fact is these entities exist. I consider it the most important thing I must share before I pass on to the other side. A poltergeist, noisy ghost, a ghost that can move objects, is something that I have experienced firsthand. It happened in the year primarily 2011. For 5.5 months, every single day, a poltergeist moved objects in my room while I was wide awake. The objects were small, usually no bigger than a bottle of water that would be, say, 1/5 full of water. Except I would have to say the largest thing it moved was a stack of boxes near my closet, right outside my closet. I had a stack of boxes about this high, and it probably wouldn't take too much pressure to knock them over. This entity knew its limitations on what it could and what it could not knock over, and it actually tested everything in the room. It creaked and sat on. I use the term sat on, but the thing was invisible, so I couldn't see it. For all I know, he was standing on everything in the room, pressing upon everything in the room, but I use the term sat because it sounded like a smaller person sitting on everything. It was definitely shorter than me, and some people might say it was psychological. But in between that 6 months, it jumped on top of me and choked my throat and held my tongue down and held my mouth, almost with 3 hands. So it could have been 2 entities. It could have been one with 3 hands. I suspect it was at least 2, but they definitely acted like one. And it had an animal-type personality. I say sometimes it acted like a dog wagging its tail, knocking over stuff, but it was a little more strategic than that. For example, knowing what it can knock over. It was definitely mischievous, a trickster spirit. It goes back in the lore of leprechauns, gnomes. I think those stories are based on first-hand encounters of the type of entity I may have encountered. Optically, 100% invisible, but it did jump on me while I was wide awake. Here's the scenario of when it jumped on me. I was watching a movie. The movie happened to be an 80s horror movie, really corny, not particularly scary, but, a little bit uneasy. This was around 10 p.m. I didn't write down the exact dates, but I remember it was around 10 p.m., about the time I go to sleep before I went to work. So I watched 15 minutes of the movie. The movie is called From Beyond. From Beyond. It's a corny 80s movie based on an H.P. Lovecraft story. And I watched 15 minutes of it. I was actually intrigued. I like the fact that in the movie there's a device where you flip a switch and you can see invisible entities, flying ghost fish, all kinds of crazy astral things that are supposedly all around us in the story. But I believe this is true in real life. And I think the movie might have resonated greatly with the entity. Either way, I think it took the opportunity thinking I was particularly scared, maybe turning it off thinking I was scared. These type of entities like to attack when you're at your most vulnerable. Perhaps it thought I was at my most vulnerable. All I can say is this. I watched 15 minutes of the movie From Beyond on my laptop. I turned it off. I turned off the light. And I walked to my bed, a good 3 feet away from the light switch. I began to put my head on the pillow. And if my ear touched the pillow, it would have touched the pillow for 1 second. We're talking no REM sleep, no type of sleep-like state. I was 100% wide awake. I just flipped off the light switch. I was about to go to sleep. And the entity jumped on top of me. I could feel the weight on my chest. I think I could feel a little bit of weight close to my legs, but it definitely seemed small. It seemed like a small entity. I would say maybe 3 feet tall maximum. It grabbed my throat. It grabbed my tongue inside my mouth. So these entities, from what I've witnessed, they have the ability to stick their hand through physical objects. They're clearly not physical entities, so they're not bound by the restrictions of physical objects. But they're territorial of this dimension. And for some reason or other, there's either a vortex on that plot of land, or it followed me and had the ability or authority to attack me for 5.5 months straight. Only after I left did the extreme activity stop. But it choked my throat, my mouth, and my tongue. It seemed like 3 hands, and the hands seemed small. They seemed like the hands of a chimpanzee, maybe the hands of, definitely had monkey-type personality. The hands of maybe a 9-year-old. Pretty small hands, but very violently gripping as hard as it could. Now, I could still breathe, but I definitely was having issues trying to breathe, but it probably could have held me for an hour straight, and I still would have been able to breathe. It wasn't cutting off all of my oxygen. I could still breathe through my nose. I couldn't breathe through my mouth. It lasted for about 2 minutes. Now, let's face it, it could have been 1 minute. During a panic, things seem longer, but 1 to 2 minutes, this thing was choking me out. It was not sleep paralysis. Some would say, oh, that's just ordinary sleep paralysis. Turning off a light switch, walking over to your bed, getting in your bed, and then you're thrashing around. I was thrashing. I was like this. My legs, I could move my legs, I could move my arms, I could move my head. I was doing this. No sleep paralysis took place. Sleep paralysis is specifically the paralyzation of the body, where your body shuts down during dreamlike states. There was no paralyzation of the body. There were 3 hands holding my mouth, my tongue, and my throat. It felt like I could reproduce it. And when you do it yourself, it's not scary. But when an invisible entity does it, it's pretty scary. So that's just a piece of my story, something that happened in the year 2011. I moved out of that place. I moved to another state. But in my opinion, this entity perhaps has followed me ever since 2011. In 2010, 6 months before the approximately 6-month encounter of the everyday poltergeist activity, I did witness, not with my eyes, but with a sixth sense ability of feeling like an electricity go through my body. And I'm going to detail exactly what that happened in the book that I wrote, because it's too important to just throw around as if it's hearsay or some anecdote. Because to me, it's not hearsay or some anecdote. It actually happened. For 5.5 months straight, this entity, or perhaps 2 entities or more, entered my room, in the corner of my room. It's a pattern I kind of noticed. This isn't a psychological thing, you see. This is a repeatable pattern that has happened many times. I have not researched the subject until after the fact, until after it happened to me. Encounters are very rare, and when I mention a story to someone how I've had first-hand personal experience with a poltergeist, their reaction is usually, "You joking with me? You messing with me?" See, immediately the reaction is disbelief, and it's understandable because it's that rare. It happened to me, and I wouldn't have believed that such poltergeist cases were 100% real until I saw it firsthand myself. One day I am going to reveal everything that the poltergeist did in my room, and but I'm going to put it in a book. I'm writing a book. I believe it's noteworthy enough to write down and put in a book. People can claim I made it up, but when I put it in a book and spend a lot of money putting it in a book, putting my testament, this happened, in a book, spending all my money self-publishing this book, hopefully it can help someone else that had a first-hand experience with a poltergeist, because what other people will tell you is that you're crazy and that didn't happen. But the fact of the matter is, it did happen. The poltergeist never jumped on me and attacked me except for this one time. So here's what happened. It was around 10 p.m. I find an 80s movie I've never seen. I'm real big into looking for obscure 80s movies. And I find From Beyond. I watch 15 minutes of it. I get to the point where they turn on the device and there's like astral creatures floating around. And the guy's like, "Whoa, there's some type of crazy, like ghost fish thing. I wonder if it can see us." And then he tries to communicate with it, and it freaking bites him, or it tries to bite him. And then they immediately turn off the device. That's when I stopped the movie, around the 15-minute mark. And I didn't stop it because I was scared. Later in the movie, there are some pretty freaky scenes. They're pretty corny, but if you're in a dark room by yourself, they can be pretty scary. So this entity maybe thought I was scared by it, but I wasn't. I just prepared to go to sleep so I could have enough sleep, knowing that there's going to be a poltergeist probably annoying me all night long. This entity, it would bang things, knock stuff over. It was still pretty freaky, but after it happened 100 times, I got pretty used to it. But I still didn't like hearing it while trying to sleep. So I had a big fan going. I had a pillow over my ear. I had the fan up to maximum. And the entity... Okay, this is what happened. So I watched the movie for 15 minutes. I see that it's about 10 10:30, around there. I turn off my laptop. I turn off the light. It's not sleep paralysis. I literally turn off the light. Let's step through it how fast it happened. Click it off. Not a second after my head touched the pillow. Not 1 second fully wide awake. Literally, this fast. It jumped on me, all right? This entity jumped on me. I was not in any REM sleep. I was not having a dream. I was not in any sleep-like state. I wasn't drowsy. I was fully wide awake. The lights were off. So, it jumps on top of me. The entity had the weight of a large monkey or a small person. And it grabbed my throat pretty strongly. It grabbed my mouth pretty strongly. It grabbed 3 parts of my body. My throat, my mouth, and my tongue. So my tongue was bound, my mouth was bound, and my throat was bound. You see, these entities, they can stick their hands right through us. They're in a higher dimension. And I guess I annoyed it one too many times by saying it's wimpy, saying it's weak, saying it's about as strong as my pinky, saying its power is about as strong as one flick of my finger, and that's pretty close to how much power it had, except for maybe on a few occasions it did a few movements of objects that were a little bit stronger than that. Maybe it did a few, we're talking maybe 6 times it pushed things down that would have been stronger than this. But most of the time, its movements of knocking objects over were no stronger than being able to flick something like that down. Like a cup, usually a half-filled bottle of water, stuff like that. This entity had a humanoid form. I believe it had 2 feet, 2 legs, if I could guess, but it wasn't 100% invisible to me. It was 100% optically invisible. I believe it just had the power in this room to manifest the ability to move objects in our dimension. Like I said before, I believe it was in the 5th dimension at least, or maybe the halfway between the 5th dimension and our dimension. We are in the 3rd/4th dimension. So it's reaching over, and it could stick its hand right through my mouth and bind my tongue. It could bind, maybe it had 3 hands, maybe it had 4 hands. Maybe this was 2 entities helping each other. All I know is for about 1 minute, for about 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, maybe 1.5 minutes, I was in this position of struggling. Upright, struggling. Right after no sleeping taking place, no dreaming taking place. So my mouth is bound, my tongue is bound, my throat is bound. And I'm like fighting this thing. And I'm not paralyzed. It's not sleep paralysis. I can move around. So I'm moving around. I'm fighting this thing. I'm like, ugh. But I can't see it. And to be honest, I can't push it off me. Trying to do this doesn't have any effect on it. I couldn't push it. It could hurt, it could physically attack me, but I couldn't physically attack it. Because, let's face it, it was basically a spirit entity, and a negative one at that. Some people have questioned whether it was, maybe it was positive. Maybe you didn't approach it from an open mind. When something jumps on top of me, grabs my throat, grabs my tongue, and grabs my mouth, that's an act of violence, and in no way, shape, or form There is literally no way that this entity was anything other than evil. Now, pure evil? Probably. But I had the feeling, based on its size, that it was an imp demon. A smaller, lower level, lower ranking minion commanded to harass me for 6 months. During the 6 months in the year 2011, when I was poltergeist haunted for 6 months straight, 182 days straight, I do round up the number. It was closer to 5.5 months. Because I remember the first 2 weeks, I didn't notice anything. So it was closer to 5.5 months straight. In the middle, well, I would say not in the middle, I would say easily 1 month in, I was grasping at straws of how to get this thing out of my room, how to get this thing out of my life. Oh, I did try prayer. I tried telling it to leave, even though I didn't open any communication with it. Telling it to leave is something I did try on a number of occasions. It would always leave and it would always come back. And that told me that it pretended, or at least seemed to claim it as its own room, and that almost I was the one intruding on their room. I was in such dire straits during the 6 months of poltergeist haunting and poltergeist activity.
One of my new favorite YouTubers, who's called John Razimus, and he's been a YouTuber for many years, in this video talking about his experience being haunted by a poltergeist for 6 months. So these thoughts I'm going to share with you would not have worked for John Razimus, because he had to deal with this poltergeist and there was nothing he could do about it. This thing would be bugging him no matter what he did. He just had to adapt to it. But he goes into description about what this poltergeist did. It was like this, you couldn't see it, but it was kind of like an imp or a monkey. The interesting thing Razimus had to say is you never communicate with a demon. Don't ever start getting into any relationship with it. Ignore it. You don't want to build up some sort of relationship that it's gonna. But anyways, that's him. That's his insight, which I really appreciate. Anyways, none of these things would work for John Razimus. He had some poltergeist haunting him for 6 months, and it's terrifying. He just had to deal with that. And you know what? He was able to survive in the end. He just like learned how to sleep with this thing throwing things around his house, trying to get him down all the time, and he didn't pay attention to it. He just did his thing, and eventually I guess it left him. But I swear to hell, I don't wish that on anyone. I don't know how I would cope with that.
I really appreciate people actually believing me, because I assure you, there are many people that do not believe me. And when a few people actually do believe me, it gives me hope in mankind, because I don't aimlessly, mindlessly spout this stuff so it can go into the ether and be deleted, and people saying, whatever. I actually mention this stuff because I hope one day someone who's under a similar circumstance will also learn at least what I learned and have a little bit more protection. So I read Napoleon Hill's book. There's a daily affirmation he recommends you write yourself. Repeat it, believe in it, to prove. I'm going to show you the daily affirmations that I wrote while I was living in the poltergeist room. A good 1 to 2 months in, I started writing a daily affirmation. This is concrete proof that I was in dire straits, that something was happening, something was bothering me to an extreme degree. An invisible entity was knocking over objects in my room on a daily basis, on a regular basis. Bottles of water, boxes, pencils, pens, Walmart bags, pillows, creaking and knocking and pounding, playing with things under my bed, knocking over my DVD collection was stacked up. He got knocked over. Many, many, many things. And I saw it while wide awake, looking around, seeing it happen. I had to buy a fan, turn it up to max volume so it would blast. I had to buy a second pillow, put it over my ear, and I had to pretend I wasn't hearing all this stuff around me all night long. But during the 6 month period of time, 5.5 months, Here are the 4 daily affirmations I wrote. I took so much great care into writing them that I have them all encased in plastic. Poltergeist. It was a demon, wasn't a human. 100% demonic as demonic gets. Jumping on top of you, grabbing your throat, grabbing your mouth, grabbing your tongue. That was during the middle of the encounters. I was wide awake, flailing, able to move, while this thing had me grabbed. After about a minute or 2 minutes, it let go. But when you're in such a stressful environment, it could have been 20 seconds. But it was considerably a long period of time. When someone's grabbing your throat and your mouth and your tongue randomly, when you're wide awake, what happened was I flicked off the light, walked over to the bed, got on the bed. Even before I could put my head on the pillow, this thing jumps on me. And most definitely I called in God's name, in Jesus' name, and I couldn't say it with my tongue. It had my tongue bound, my mouth bound, and my throat bound. And I said Jesus' name in my head for probably 30 seconds, probably a minute straight. It's hard to say, it's hard to judge in situations like that. It did let go to the part where I could barely talk, and then I said it with my mouth, in the name of Jesus Christ, get out of here. And it was gone for 1 hour, and then it came back. After the encounter, I turned on the light. I was like, wow, that's the worst this thing's ever done to me. Just thinking to myself, I'm not crazy. It happened. Let me tell you about one of the more prominent things that knocked over in my room. I get to Taco Bell. Normally I would just pick up the bag and go home and just eat it at home. But remembering, oh yeah, there's a demon in poltergeist in my room. Maybe I'll eat in the Taco Bell restaurant today by myself. I'll just eat as slow as I can because the poltergeist demon isn't bothering me in the Taco Bell restaurant. It's not bothering me at work. It's not bothering me in my car. But it most definitely was bothering me in that room I rented, the master bedroom. So I eat my burrito meal in the restaurant of Taco Bell. 2 miles away, I drive back to my room. I unlock the door. I walk in. I'm just on my laptop. Literally, just surfing the internet, usually game related. The poltergeist enters the room, in the corner of the room, making very prominent creaks in the corner of the room. Creak, 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 creak. Very loud, very obvious. Then it starts to play with something on my table, maybe a bottle of water with this much water in it. It wouldn't even touch a full bottle of water that's sealed, but it will most definitely, and there's bugs all around here, it would most definitely know what it had the ability to knock over. And in advance scheme as to what thing it's going to knock over for me next. It literally had intelligence, it had a personality. Its personality was that of like a dog wagging its tail, a monkey mischievously going through your stuff. Definitely animalistic. I couldn't see it, it's optically invisible. When it jumped on top of me in the middle of the encounters, very lightweight creature. The weight of a small chimpanzee, maybe a big monkey, maybe a big cat, maybe a small dog. It's hard to say, but you couldn't push it off. It's on you, there's weight on you, you couldn't push it off. I see stuff shifting and moving around. A bottle of water knocked over, some pencils touched and moved very obviously, very loudly against my metal glass, which the pencils are inside of. So I know it's in the room. I know it's there. I'm like, at this point, many months in, at this point, I was like, whatever, dude. Don't even care. I wouldn't have said that. I would have just thought something like that. And I just continued to surf the internet. It makes enough noise where, let's say it's 8 p.m. I get up out of the bed. I stand up. and I am pointed in the direction that it made a noise. That direction happened to be my closet. In front of the closet, there's a stack of about 4 boxes. They're fairly lightweight. I don't know if there's clothes in them. We're talking 5 pounds each. Fairly lightweight boxes. Cardboard boxes. And I'm about 5 feet away from these cardboard boxes. And I sense the entity is in that direction because I can hear it. I just might take a guess, like the Invisible Man. If the Invisible Man makes a noise here, he could easily walk over there and fool you as to where he is. Poltergeists are definitely like the Invisible Man, except they can walk through you, whereas the Invisible Man wouldn't have that ability. And it definitely walked through me. This spirit walked through me every single night like clockwork. I think to gauge where my spirit is at. I'm standing 5 feet away from the boxes. I sense because I hear a creak, but I also seem to have some ability to sense, actually feel that it's in this direction. I'm just using my intuition at this point, and I sense it's right there, but then again, I'm probably also relying on my ears, having heard something come from right there. So I point in the direction of these boxes and I say, hey, get out of my room, get out of here. And I say, in the name of Jesus Christ, get out of here. And 2 seconds after I say that, 2 seconds, 2 boxes knock over, 5 feet away from me. These boxes knock over violently, like they were kicked over while the entity's leaving. It's like while the entity's on its way out, it's like, F you. It knocks over the boxes. And of course, as always, the entity came back 1 hour later. A secret that isn't mentioned in too many places. With true, authentic poltergeist victims, experiencers. And that is me. I'm an authentic witness to poltergeist activity. It is real. I was able to determine the personality of the being. Had nothing to do with me. Any human that falls into a trap that, it's some psychokinesis, some type of telekinesis, some type of, you have the ability. It's just a youthful, No, those are all lies and cover stories created by probably the deceiver to hide the fact that poltergeist demons are demons. They're demonic entities that play trickster games with humans, period. The thing didn't seem to have too much of an intelligence level. It seemed pretty dumb. All right, I'm going to say that off the bat. But it could understand English, because I made that "you're as strong as my pinky finger, my index finger at best" joke to it, to which a few months later, it flicked me on the forehead really strongly. So clearly these entities can understand English. They could understand every language. They're older than all of us. I am a first-hand witness of poltergeist activity. I know it's real. I know it's a real phenomenon. Beyond that, I have a good idea. And 6 months of first-hand witnessed accounts testifying to the details of what it was, why it showed up. In the year 2010, I first witnessed an unseen, invisible entity. A year later, I experienced 6 months of poltergeist activity when I rented a room. I would have moved out sooner, but it was the cheapest room I could find. It was an extremely traumatic event. I suffer from PTSD, legitimately, not as a joke, actually, from the horrific experiences from the year 2011 when I was poltergeist haunted and terrorized for 6 months. Around the middle of that 6-month experience, I was violently attacked by this invisible entity. This isn't a Birdman situation where I was pretending to see objects move in my room. This isn't some type of schizophrenic situation where I was hearing voices. What I saw is what I saw. It's an actual experience that actually happened to me. I've mentioned this to a few people here and there, and one of the first people I mentioned this to told me to never mention it again, told me to not talk about it, which only made me want to talk about it more. I'm dedicated for the rest of my life to exploring the unknown, seeking truth, exposing lies. When the occult seeks you out, terrorizes you, haunts you when you're an innocent victim, and that's what I was. I never read a single occult book in my life. I was going to work every day and coming home, watching regular movies, regular TV shows. But the one time I did watch a corny 80s horror movie, the movie is called From Beyond. It's actually an H.P. Lovecraft inspired movie. After watching 15 minutes of that movie, I turned it off, closed my laptop, went to bed because I had to work the next day. No sooner than 1 second after I turned off my light and put my head on my pillow, we're talking my head was probably on my pillow for a millisecond before this entity jumped on top of me, grabbed my mouth, grabbed my throat, grabbed my tongue. So it felt kind of like 3 hands grabbing me. These encounters, these stories, they're all 100% true. They're not clickbait. They're not in any way, shape, or form exaggerated. If anything, I have under-exaggerated them. The opposite of exaggeration, I've held back a lot of the information. Not only because I'm writing about it in a book called Corners of Rooms, but because most people don't believe me anyway. So I try to hold back the more fantastical details. It wasn't like being in a movie. It wasn't like the movie Poltergeist. Objects didn't fly around my room. So some people have encountered, rarely, levitation and things like that. I can't say that I ever witnessed with my eyeballs any levitation during the 6-month period. It mostly involved the entity, which was completely invisible, really broadcasting its presence, letting me know it was there by knocking on walls, knocking on tables, knocking on my bed, knocking on any surface in the whole room, sitting. I used the term sitting because it sounded like sitting. I couldn't see the entity, but creaking on everything, which sounded a lot like sitting on every object in the room, from boxes in my closet to anything that was in a particular corner of that room. The entity had a favorite corner of the room, and I talk about the corners of rooms in a few videos. Corners of rooms is one of the patterns I noticed after 6 months, witnessing it for 6 months straight. I don't think these entities are aware that I happen to be a little more observant than the other sparse humans they've appeared to. And they probably didn't expect I would write a book on them. Or maybe that was their plan all along. All I can say is this: they hide in the shadows. They hide in the unseen realm. They are the source and definition of the occult, pretty much, because they know a lot. They've been watching us for probably the length of time that we've ever existed on this planet. The creature that bothered me for 6 months, I believe it was assigned to me from the year before. I have read many occult books after the fact, after the encounter, and I have come across a good number of common threads mentioned throughout history, but never pieced together. Corners of Rooms is a repeating trend, a repeating pattern that almost proves that these entities are not a figment of the human mind, but are actual invisible entities from a higher dimension. These entities are slightly above us. I suspect 1 dimension above us. These entities are real. I stand as a testimony and a first-hand witness that they are real. And because they are real, other things in this universe are real as well. I do not believe this entity was a human ghost. I believe it's closer to a demon. So my story came from first-hand witnessing for 6 months straight. Not just witnessing with my eyes, seeing objects move by an unseen force, but hearing it as well, feeling it, and sensing it with even another sense, some might call the 6th sense. What I care about is the truth. What happened to me happened to me. It wasn't a figment of my mind. Very, 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 very few people have experienced authentic poltergeist activity firsthand. I seek to find at least one other authentic poltergeist witness on this planet Earth. I have yet to communicate with one. I'm talking about someone who had a similar encounter. When a poltergeist entity makes its presence known in your room for 6 months straight, it's not a question of, I'm not sure. You 100% know for a fact the second after it happens. As I mentioned earlier, I do suffer from PTSD, probably not as bad as veterans who are in the foxhole. I feel for people with such extreme PTSD as that. In no way, shape, or form do I claim to have that. But at the same time, they don't have what I have. I have a different form. It involves being terrorized by an invisible creature for 6 months straight. An entity whose singular purpose was to bother me, torture me by keeping me up all night. And it did keep me up all night on more than one occasion. Probably the first 2 weeks, I didn't have much sleep. Let's just put it that way. But the human mind can adjust. It's very bizarre how the human mind can adjust. But when you experience it firsthand, you get a front row seat to certain secrets. What I experience is real. What I experience is true. It's worth investigating. It's important. It's probably the singular reason I'm here on this planet Earth. We all serve a purpose. My purpose is to expose corners of rooms, unseen invisible entities, poltergeists, to be actual intelligent, independent from humans, entities living in a dimension slightly above us. They can look down at us and see us. We can look up and not see them. That's how dimension works. When you break down the dimensions, that's how it works. These demonic entities, these invisible entities, they are not all-seeing. They're only in one dimension above us, but they can see everything that's below them. When it's happening to you, stuff knocking over in your room, and you can see it in full-blown daylight. You can see an object get knocked over 2 feet in front of your face, 3 feet in the distance, 4 feet in the distance, 5 feet over there. You just see something get shoved over by an invisible hand. It's pretty freaky. The first thought in your mind isn't, oh, let me grab a camera so I can get this on video. Let me grab it on a camera so I can get this on video might be the mindset of someone that thinks of the universe as a cartoon and a joke. But in my opinion, I was being harassed by an invisible entity knocking over something that could potentially destroy and kill me at any second. Something that was a threat, a real threat. I'm glad nothing has happened tonight. Residual things happen. The poltergeist phenomena is real. I was ignorant of it until it happened to me in the year 2011. I had a good job, I was kicking back, and I noticed after a few weeks that, hey, this is a very actively haunted by a poltergeist entity room. I lived with the thing for 6 months. That 6-month timetable, that time frame, I believe, is some type of unknown secret law of the universe. I didn't know during the 6 months how long it would last. I don't want to even acknowledge this thing exists, let alone talk to it. I do not want to talk to it. No communication. That was literally the strongest thought in my head, and it wasn't coming from an outside source. That was internally, I was like, whoa. See, from an outside perspective, from someone that doesn't even believe or know poltergeists exist, it's a cartoon Twilight Zone episode, and sure, they would record it, they'd have fun with it, they become best friends with it. These things don't appear, they don't show up very often. It's an extremely, extremely rare scenario. Now, I didn't ever say, okay, spirit, what do you want? I never said that once, ever. If it levitated anything, like I said, a tiny screw in a drawer in my tower computer, I believe, was picked up and dropped. And I heard that in pitch blackness while I was trying to sleep. And that was in between other ruckuses, other things moving around, other knocks and bangs. The thing was particularly playful that night and played with multiple things in my room. To just give a really vague description or summarize, some people say, oh, how do you know it wasn't your imagination? Or how do you know it wasn't this or that? How do you know it's an independent entity? Literally, the first thing you notice, at least with the 6-month entity, is it has the gist of you lay down and it sounds like someone just walked into your room and that person is going in circles and that person is playing with everything in your room, just going in circles, just playing with you. It almost had the personality of, let's say, a buddy that wants to wake you up really badly from a movie. Like they're just knocking over everything. Let's go to the party, come on. And it just knocks over everything. It just really wanted to get my attention. Perhaps it did want me to talk to it and communicate with it. My number one thought was do not communicate. I had the thought maybe I should film it, but I realized quickly, because I really thought about it, this thing was actually happening in front of me. I thought, if I record it, what am I going to do? Put a bottle on a table and say, hey, can you knock that bottle over for me? I didn't want to open any communication. It's a dreadful, fearful type situation. It's not a cartoon. It's not a Twilight Zone episode. It actually happened. The thing sat and everything in my room. I have to admit, and I don't think I've even mentioned it too many times, if ever, but on camera. But I did command it to leave, my poltergeist entity. And it would always come back. The entity had authority to be in my room. Even thinking about the authority situation and some type of rank system and the principality system, all of these things went through my head. I do believe there are principalities, which is an old-fashioned term for a piece of land, a lot of land, owned or ran by a prince. So I think some entities are literally assigned to a piece of land, which is why I think stories of that forest demon, or that field demon, or that stream and water demon, perhaps they're assigned to that actual piece of land, and I think there's other entities that are assigned to you from birth. And they can see us because we're below them. They look down and they can see us. In 2011, I had first-hand experience with a poltergeist entity. The first time I had experience with a poltergeist entity was in 2010, but it was very brief concerning the poltergeist aspect. I was just minding my own business. I moved into a room that happened to be poltergeist haunted. This entity was territorial of a specific corner in my room. So I didn't even attempt to experiment with it. It was accidental experimentation of me just having objects over there. They always got knocked down until I moved everything out of that corner of the room. The green screen near the corner of my room was yanked down violently. It was yanked down. I saw it yanked. I saw the tacks fly out, the oversized tacks. So I made new holes, pinned it properly, only to see about a minute later, I saw it really closely the second time, yanked down. This is how they were yanked down, and I've never revealed this. I got to see the bottom of the green sheet, and it looked like it was stepped on. It looked like it was, the entity jumped up and stepped on the green sheets on the bottom of the floor near the corner of the room, and that's how the sheet was yanked down, both times. I started to notice, hey, 165 days in a row, if I put anything near that corner, it gets pushed out of the corner, as if this is my corner. Very territorial, invisible entity. Whether you believe that or not, it actually happened. It's September 20th, 2018. My history is true. The account is accurate. I've kept a lot of things back. I am writing a book, not for money. I've been working on the book for 5 years, but it's really difficult. I didn't keep a journal. I have a few scraps of paper where I wrote down a few things, and I did draw a couple drawings. And I did have a few strong impressions that I've left out, I've never mentioned. But everything eventually will be mentioned to the fullest extent from A to Z. Not just in the book, but after I make the book, I'm going to recount and retell what's in the book. I'll read straight from the book. You don't have to buy the book, but it will help me out. But it's not just for helping me out. After I'm dead, I'd be happy for the book to be translated in other languages. I know every culture on Earth, the sun's in my face, it's hard to get a good, the sun's in my face, but every culture worldwide has experienced poltergeist activity for thousands of years, but only the few and far between. I just want to break that surface of letting everyone know that, hey, this is not a construct of the mind. It's not a figment of the imagination. It's not the psyche. It's not telekinesis, psychokinesis, moving objects with one's mind. Only an extreme egomaniac, narcissist, full-blown, they think the world revolves around them type of person would think, oh, I have magic powers, I can move objects with my mind, I'm a Jedi. Only an extreme self-centered person would ever jump to that conclusion. I know for a fact he was independent from me, a different conscious being, a different conscious person that happens to be invisible from me was doing it. It wasn't anything other than an independent person. It happened. It's true. I'll continue to talk about it. I just wanted to make this compilation so people could see I have been talking about it consistently since 2015. So I did take a 3-year break of never talking about it online or posting any videos, but I did tell close family and friends and relatives about it. A few of them believe, and many of them disbelieve. It's standard, no matter whether they're your friend or your family or a stranger. It's always going to be the few believing. If you believe, you are believing in a truth, so you're better off. If you disbelieve and scoff, then you probably can't judge the difference between something scripted, something concocted, designed, invented for consumption, for entertainment. This is not entertainment. It happened. I don't think it's ever going to be turned into anything huge. We're talking lies that people make up, have had huge stories written about them. Not a single person has ever written a single story, as far as I can see, about me and my encounters. No one cares of any extreme amount, except for the few and far between. I've shared this information for the few that it's happened to. There's no such thing as a poltergeist support group. Doesn't exist. For obvious reasons, because it doesn't happen to too many people. I don't know the numbers. I can't crunch the numbers. There are no numbers to crunch. One out of 1 out of 1 million people experience it, would be my guess. But 1 out of 1 billion people, perhaps, I don't know, 1 out of half a billion people, 1 out of 1/4 billion people, I don't know. But it's very rare. It's a very rare phenomenon. I'm going to continue to talk about it till the day I die. It's the most important thing that's ever happened to me. I didn't film it, which is why I investigate ghosts, spirits, demons. Because I know they're there. I know they're real. I didn't film it at the time because it's not how you would picture it to be. I can't even come up with an analogy even close. But just think of the scariest person on planet Earth being in your room and being invisible. I don't know how to describe it. But you're not of the mindset of, oh, let's make a video. You're of the mindset of, I don't want anything to do with that. Filming it would encourage it. I didn't want it to encourage it. I'll reveal right now for the first time ever. The entity knocked over my tripod in the corner of my room. The tripod had my very first Sony camcorder. Before that, I owned really, really low quality, cheap cameras, valued at less than $100. But I saved up and saved up and saved up. And I waited for this Sony camcorder to be on sale until I got it on sale. And I was planning on making totally unrelated videos for this channel. YouTube.com/hoaxhunter is this channel. I was planning on making hoax hunter busting hoax videos for fun. This happened, totally unrelated subject, even though I busted time travel hoaxers, and I did like to focus on the paranormal. But I didn't expect the supernatural paranormal to come and start harassing me. It took me off guard. I had zero interest in researching it. It happened. 5.5 months straight. 165 days in a row. I rounded up to the 6 months, which is 182 days, I guess, but it was closer to 165 days in a row. And over 2,400 objects were moved, either in front of my eyes or while I was sleeping, but I would say easily 50% of the objects that moved between a radius of 1 foot to 15 feet with my eyes watching as it happened. The entity was showcasing, was putting on a production for me. Not to entertain me, but it obviously enjoyed scaring me. But there's a thing about 5.5 months of every single day, 165 days in a row, over 2,400 objects moving in front of your face. I would say, cut that in half, 1,200 objects in front of my eyeballs I watched. Over 1,200 objects, items in my room, sometimes the same thing over and over and over, would move in front of my face from an unseen, invisible being. When that happens, the first 2 weeks I couldn't sleep, pretty much zero sleep. Maybe 1 hour of sleep for 2 weeks, every single night, 1 hour, you know. But by the end of month 1, as I said, I came up with a daily affirmation. I was inspired by Napoleon Hill. That helped. I'm going to detail everything in the future. But what I want to get to is, after 5 months of these attacks and harassments, it was even before 5 months. We're talking 4 months in. 4 months in, I was so used to it. It was boring. It was not supernatural. It was normal. And I got used to it. And as Roger Morneau, a different experiencer who experienced poltergeist activity, he's now since passed, he said it's extraordinary how the mind can adjust to the supernatural. and how it becomes commonplace after you've experienced it for a certain period of time. And I can attest to that 100%. It was normal, and we're talking, I would be playing a video game or watching a movie with my headphones on, and he would knock over a bottle of water, knock over a cup full of pencils, knock over some bags, knock over, and I will detail exactly the biggest things it knocked over. And as I said, it knocked over my tripod with my camera on top of it in the corner of my room. I moved everything out of the corner of the room, which it manifested from every single day, 165 days in a row. Corners of rooms is a real phenomenon these entities use. But after 4 months, after 4 months, I was like, I would have thought to myself, you can do better than that. That's nothing. But I didn't. I would think stuff like that because I didn't want to encourage it. I did provoke it once. And when I say I kicked it out of my room and commanded it to leave, I commanded it to leave maybe 20 times, maybe 30 times, maybe as many as 40 times, 50 times. But I quickly learned that it came back 1 hour later every single time. I quickly learned that. And when you quickly learn something, that it comes back more violent and more angry 1 hour later, you stop kicking it out. I stopped kicking it out. One of the last times I kicked it out was when, about the midway point, 3 months in, or 2.5 months in, close to the midway point, when it jumped on top of me and grabbed my throat and my tongue in my mouth. I definitely commanded it to leave then. It came back 1 hour later, and I commanded it to leave again. And my record for kicking it out would have been close to 5 times in one night. And remember, it comes back 1 hour later. So commanded to leave, comes back. Commanded to leave, comes back. Commanded to leave, comes back. But there's an hour spaced between those times coming back. And I would have spent 5-6 hours of my entire night kicking it out and it being more angry and more violent every time it comes back. So needless to say, I got 0 sleep the night that I kicked it out 5 times in a row. And I got loud to the point where I'm surprised if my roommates didn't hear it. My 2 roommates, I didn't get to talk to the sushi chef to the right of me, the room to the right, because he was hardly ever there. I did talk to he wrote books. He said he wrote books, and he said he had dreams. I talked to that guy for a couple hours, for a couple days, extensively about my encounters. He was always like, really? He was never quite sure if it was true, because he happened to write fantasy books, and for all he knew, I was pitching him a fantasy book. That's not the case, but he was a nice guy. And not immediately, but within the first couple months of it happening, me catching him coming in or leaving the house, I would have said, hey, have you experienced any poltergeist activity? And he's like, what? And we had a full-blown conversation. He smoked a cigarette. We sat on the patio. I would have drank a soda or water, and he might have had a beverage. Doesn't matter. But he was a cool guy. We kicked back. We talked about it. He was intrigued. And then he shared his fantasy stories with me. And that's, I was appreciative, but I could see he didn't. It was from left field. It was a foreign concept to him. Understandably, it's a foreign concept to many people. It happened to me. I testify. I stand here as a witness. If anyone else has experienced something similar, feel free to contact me. Razimus@gmail.com. Razimus at Twitter. Contact me. We can have a dialogue. I've yet to have any lengthy conversation with anybody that experienced more than a tiny object moving for a few seconds once in their life. 165 days in a row, 15, an average 10 to 20 objects, 15, if it was 15 objects a day, that's a good average. It would have been over 2,400 objects being moved in the space of 5.5 months. That's what I experienced, but it was more than that. It was knocks, creaks, bangs, sitting sounds, and it did sit on some pillows, and they puffed up. It sat on pillows again, and it puffed up again. That, of all things, I wish I had on camera, because it would be impossible to special effects have foam pillows go down, and up with an impression inside of them. But even then, I had no desire to film it. The pillow incident. I walked up to my door to make sure it was locked, because I didn't want anyone barging my room, especially the landlady, but it was locked, so it was fine. But as I was walking to the door, or as I was walking away from the door, 1 foot away from the door, about 2 feet to the left of the door, maybe 1.5 foot stacked to the wall to the left of the door, I had a couple boxes, and I had a couple foam pillows that I got for my chairs. I was doing repainting some chairs. They're space age chairs. Anyway, I still have them in my garage, these 2 pillows. I've yet to recover them to this day. But it sat down, and I was literally, the boxes were like 1.5 feet left to the door, but I was about 2 feet away from the pillows. Very close. Maybe 2.5 feet, very close. The impression went down, it went up, and it went down, and it went up. Almost like the spirit wanted for the first time to know what it's like to sit on a cushion. Or it just wanted to scare me. It just wanted to tell me it was there. Exactly. And when it happened, I was tempted to wave my hand over the pillows. But I restrained myself. Even then, I restrained myself from doing it. Because it was scary, knowing you're waving your hand through a demon. I'm going to detail every encounter I remember. But a lot of it was repetitive, just over and over and over and over. Very similar things. One time it played with the luggage under my bed. One time it picked up a tiny screw in my computer, close to the corner. I moved everything away from that corner. One time, or multiple times, it stepped on Walmart bags, just plastic bags on the floor, and I could hear it. I could hear its footsteps. And I quickly got every Walmart bag, safely threw them away or secured them. Every single pencil and bottle of water, I quickly put them together or threw them away. I made sure there was no small objects for it to move around. But still, it managed to creak and scheme to knock over things. And the biggest thing was 2 boxes near my closet. When you experience this, it's not a joke. It's not for fun. I don't benefit from it. Matter of fact, family and friends don't like me. They don't like it when I mention it. I guarantee you there are friends and family of mine that mock me behind my back. I've not benefited from it at all. But I still think it's important. I'm reaching out to anyone who's experienced it as well. It's true, it's a real phenomenon. I thank you for watching. This has been John Razimus. Be seeing you.